Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Melvin Way. I have many plant growing series on my YouTube channel. Please check them out. Subscribe to my channel, like and share my videos. So the first thing I did was cut a lemon in half, obviously with a garden variety knife, and the first thing I noticed was that 7 seeds were damaged. That's pretty typical. When you get served a drink in a restaurant, glass of water, if they put a slice of lemon, you'll notice all these chopped in half seeds. It's amazing how, despite all the room in there that you figure the seeds would have to maneuver around being surrounded by a soft pulp, when you run a knife through them, the seeds are easily cut in half without being fixed in place with anything hard. But it's actually quite stable in there, so that's what happens. They get chopped in half. So there are 20-something seeds at least in this average lemon. It's not even a very big lemon. As you can see there, I had at least 20 to 25 seeds. So the first thing you want to do is grab a towel or paper towel, use your fingers, hold it in place. Obviously you're not going to use a vise or something for some tiny seed like this. And there's a pointy end. It's very easy. Second thing you do is scrape off that end in any direction and start peeling off the seed coat after you've fixed it in place. So these things, despite being dried out to some degree by the towel, are slippery, and the rest is just this slow but relatively easy process of peeling off additional layers of seed coat, and they come off in strips like that. So you can opt to do this without gloves too, of course, but these are very acidic fruits full of citric acid. There are 5 to 6% citric acid, so that's a fair bit of acid to be dealing with, getting under your fingernails and whatnot if you're going to sit here and peel 20-something seeds, which I initially thought I was going to do, but I realized how much work it was. So these seeds feel like hard kernels of corn. That's their appearance as well. I guess you could say they look like miniature acorns or whatever, but I'd say they look like kernels of corn. So it takes a lot of time to do just 5, and that's the amount I ended up going with. I figured unless I'm doing some kind of fundamental damage to these, because this is my first time, maybe if I'm scraping off the tip too hard, I'm damaging something and ripping off the root tips or whatever, then these things can't even get started. But it turns out not to be the case, and the first time was good enough. I peeled 5 of these, ripped them out of their seed coats, and there was nothing that required delicacy. You just need to spend time and hunker down and start peeling away until you're done. And it takes a long time, actually. I mean, I fast forwarded through a lot of this footage and edited out all the bloopers, such as dropping the seeds because they're slippery and then picking them up and whatnot. And I didn't show everything here, so oftentimes you'll peel and you'll wipe and you peel and you'll wipe, and you'll notice there are extra strips of seed coat on like that. I would say what you see here, that last strip of seed coat, that wasn't even necessary to remove. Seed coats often prevent water from getting in contact with the seed right away, so if there's a jelly on a seed, slimy coat or whatever, you can just rub that away and you'll be good to go. The seeds will start absorbing water and nutrients once their root systems become active, and they'll be good to go. So that's it in a nutshell. I have 4 here, but later on I did 1 more. You can see the seeds that have been cut in half so easily by the knife right here, which is a common sight in restaurant water cups, and all these other seeds as well. So that's basically it for the peeling seed coats part of the tutorial. And after that, I had this pot that was pretty much ready to go. I had sterilized by steaming this potting mix and used it to grow cantaloupes for 22 days. It was a very short filler series. So I decided to reuse this pot as is without a repeat sterilization after just 3 weeks. to prevent spider mites and fungus gnats from taking a hold. It was very clean seemingly, and you can see all the ripped stems of cantaloupe seedlings, the leaves, and this old seed coats. So I planted these 5 seeds sideways and just sprinkled a tiny bit of dirt on them. I didn't want to pack down too hard, and I didn't want to have them go through too much dirt to sprout. So just a few millimeters is enough, 1 centimeter at the most. So I'm doing some light fertilization with Miracle-Gro for general purpose growth, and I'm also fertilizing with a Men's Daily Multivitamin. This is a generic version of the kind I eat to save on cost, since I'm doing this a lot these days. So a multivitamin has all these micronutrients, trace metal elements and whatnot in there, so that would provide for anything that the soil might be lacking in. And the Miracle-Gro provides for 3 of the main macronutrients that plants typically need for fast growth: nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. So I'm doing some light watering very sparingly, just so the nutrients that I've scattered on here will only go in a tiny bit and not be washed all the way to the middle or the bottom of the soil. That would be pointless. So the reason I'm doing this right now is because I want the roots that will become active after maybe just a day or two to start absorbing nutrients and get a much quicker start. So that was a passion fruit flower. Please check out my Growing Passion Fruits from Seed series. It's day 11, and I noticed a typical bulge in the potting mix. And upon some further investigation, I saw that there was a sprout underneath, and I actually wasn't sure that this was a lemon tree sprout as opposed to a cantaloupe seed that had just become active after I had removed everything else. So I don't see a bulge anywhere else. And the next day, I noticed that there were 2 sprouts. I moved this pot on day 11 over to be next to my mango pot because I wasn't sure it was getting the optimal amount of sunlight. It was on the left end of this table. But in the end, it seemed that the lemon tree series was progressing as fast as the mango tree series had, despite the much smaller seeds. It took 13 days for sprouts to come out of the ground. So I'll show you very soon. So this is still day 12. Watering sparingly, only to wet the top layer of potting mix every 1 to 2 days because that's what dries out. Since I've watered previously for the cantaloupe series, I was sure that everything in the bottom beneath was already wet. So it's day 13, and I finally have 2 sprouts towards me, towards the front of the pot, where I'm standing in terms of orientation, because the rim of the pot blocks some of the sunlight from hitting the potting mix at the far end. So it's always these 2, especially in this corner, the lower right. That's what germinates first and sprouts because it receives the greatest amount of sunlight. My balcony is west facing, and it receives some of that southwest sun every day. So I can remove some of this stuff and let the leaves have an easier time to unfurl. But otherwise, after I'm done showing you, I'm just going to put a chunk of potting mix to the south of it, southwest of it, to make sure that this seed that's exposed won't dry out, because I'm sure the root system is not far away. So it's kind of interesting. You can see the seed has sort of a reddish color there. I'm not sure where the root is here, but you can see the endosperm. It's turned green as well from exposure to light. After this unfurls and starts growing, I'm going to sprinkle on some dry potting mix to cover all that stuff up if anything's exposed. Do a little bit of micromanagement to fill the gaps and ensure everything gets a good start. So I'm doing spot fertilization again with Miracle-Gro, and I'm just watering enough to dissolve most of the crystals. Don't necessarily have to dissolve everything. I could save that for next time when I water. but I don't want to again wash the nutrients too deep and deprive these seedlings of access to these nutrients that I'm giving them. I hope you enjoyed watching this video tutorial on how to get started for growing lemon trees from seeds. Please come back to my YouTube channel for further updates often. Thanks for watching. Welcome back for a second episode of Growing Lemon Trees from Seeds. This covers days 14 through 31. This first mover on day 15 is bent at a right angle coming out of the soil so soon. It has one healthy leaf, one unhealthy. This one looks like its cotyledons are just burned, dead or dying. They're deformed, but there's growth in the middle. Shoot apical meristem is still working. And the third and fourth positions to sprout look like they can still be salvaged and have healthy shoots. I hope this is not some kind of global condition where all five are going to look like that, the first one and the second one. So it's day 17. This isn't getting any better. It looks like something could still sprout from the middle, new sets of leaves. And same here, everything just looks shriveled, deformed, and smaller than I think it should be. You know, this reminds me a lot of the Navel Orange episode 2, and I cut the series off after that because as soon as I took off the plastic wrap and exposed it to the dry atmosphere, it got burned up and died over the next few days. I'm not suggesting that's the problem here, but on day 20, this first mover looks like it's more or less a goner. Looks to be in bad shape. The stem itself is turning kind of yellow. The same has happened here. So I think for these first two positions, they're done for. They're goners. And the same thing is happening here with the third and fourth movers. And it's the same story. I don't know if this is a fungal infection or whatnot, but it seems like we do have the fifth seed germinating in the least favorable position. This position in the upper left of the pot receives the least amount of sunlight every day. And as you can see, the wall of the pot, the rim, shades it a little bit. So on day 24, I basically gave up hope for the first four movers. And this one is very interesting. It still looks very healthy, although it's too early to say. The others looked healthy coming out for the first few days, and then they all died. So what looks like a piece of dirt is actually a membrane. The seed, whatever it is, I wouldn't say seed coat since I peeled that off, but you know, the endosperm is all green and split open like that. It's odd. So on day 27, I basically gave up hope for the first four. I think they're all dead, and I don't want to relocate this one or touch it in any way. I haven't watered for quite a while actually. It's been maybe 2 weeks at this point because I had a string of cloudy, cold days in the 70s in the Fahrenheit, maybe the low 20s in Celsius. And it wasn't until day 29 that I decided that I would use some distilled water with a little bit of Miracle Grow mixed in to fertilize. I didn't want to wet the pot anymore because I'm sure for such a large mass of soil in this large pot, the soil would stay wet for weeks and weeks. So I'm somewhat thinking that this is all due to root rot, although I'm not sure why the coldest, wettest position in the pot, which this one occupies, would be the one that doesn't get root rot. And I still haven't solved this mystery of what happened last year to my navel orange. I ate 50 navel oranges, I got 2 seeds, and then I peeled the seed coat, tried to germinate them. Actually, I think for that, maybe I didn't peel the seed coat right away. But anyway, they looked a lot like the seedlings earlier in this episode on days, 14 through mid-20s, where everything just came out bent, and then as soon as I removed the plastic wrap to that navel orange seedling last year, the sole survivor of the 2, it just shriveled away and died. Looked like it was burned. So I'm just going to do this spot watering here, and since the rest of the potting mix in the pot is drying out, if it's too wet, the moisture will just dissipate and get absorbed by the drier potting mix adjacent to it. So thanks for watching the second update. I hope to have a lot more progress soon. Alright, it's day 35. It's the third episode of this Growing Lemon Trees from Seed series. The first set of true leaves are looking good. You can hardly see the stubble that looks burnt. The one in the middle and the fourth one to germinate to the right of this have green stems that haven't been charred yet, but they soon will be. Results speak for themselves. Colder and wetter in this pot is better, and I'm keeping the two halves of the endosperm exposed because there seems to be no harm in doing so. They functionally act as two additional leaves, especially back in the time where the first true leaves were so tiny and just coming out of the cotyledons. So the leaf edges look a little, I wouldn't say warty, but they look not smooth. It's the same way it was with the navel orange last year, and the tree got off to a very similar start actually, except this one actually survived because it's in a more advantageous position in the pot, in my opinion. You can see the shade has almost reached the seedling. So I'm fertilizing with a low concentration of fertilizer. It's Miracle Grow. You can hardly see the blue in there to let the rest of the soil in the pot dry out. During the germination process, I watered so much from the top, and I started with a potting mix that was quite wet already, so some water gathered in the bottom watering tray, which is hard to see in these kind of pots versus the beige ones I have. But the pot would be heavy with water, and I sprayed a little bit of water here, distilled water, to wash off any droplets of fertilizer. Even at such low concentrations, I don't want water spots or potential fertilizer burns to occur, although I don't think I've ever had that problem. Well, maybe with a California goldenrod. So it's day 38. The first set of true leaves are bigger. The rest of this pot looks like a barren desert at this point because I'm not watering any of the stuff on top to keep it dark and damp. So the true leaves are bigger. There's another, actually I wouldn't exactly call them a set because they seem to grow at alternating intervals, nodes on the stem. But the stem is getting longer. The leaves aren't a verdant green, but neither were the leaves for the mango at first. In fact, the green here took a lot less time to show up. It was never red or really yellow like the nascent mango seedlings were. And I'm keeping the two halves of the endosperm exposed. Why not? I'm guessing the root system, well, maybe it won't go as long and deep as the mango taproot did. It's probably going down a few centimeters. So here I've spun around the pot just to give you some better videography. And it's not a beautiful plant at this point, but the fact that it's growing and everything else died, it makes me happy. So the stem is a little curved, as you can see, due to phototropism, and eventually I might consider other positions, but for now I'll just rotate it back to the position it was in. It's doing well. If I have it in this position where it receives the most amount of sun and heat during the day, then it might die like the other ones did. So I think the results definitely speak for themselves. Refilled the squirt bottle, and basically it has a dissolved multivitamin to the best of my ability. Actually, most of the crushed multivitamin didn't dissolve. Maybe the concentration is just too high, or there are insoluble compounds in there. Perfectly understandable. So later on I washed out the squirt bottle, took out the supernatant first, and then put it back. So I'm doing a little bit of showering with my showering can here. I think I can afford to keep this a little wetter than the mango, but that's still not a lot of water. It's all on the surface, so the sun will dry that out and cause it to evaporate soon enough. So with the crushed multivitamin in there, it has a more of a green appearance than just that crystal blue. Alright, it's day 46 of this series. I've pulled this table forward by about 5 to 6 inches so I can stagger 5 pots on it instead of only having 3 side by side. that means my Joshua tree and century plant pots should do much better. So the node distance has increased here. The stem is elongating. You can see the leaves, they don't come out in pairs, they come out alternating one by one, and the directionality isn't symmetrical at this point. A third leaf will grow sort of perpendicular to the other two, which is good. We'll have a maximizing of the potential sunlight that can be captured by the leaves for photosynthesis. There's a fourth true leaf and a fifth true leaf coming as well. That means these green endosperm halves will diminish in importance because they once contributed to a lot of the total percentage of area that can be used for photosynthesis, and now that's not the case anymore. But nevertheless, I don't like seeing debris just sitting on there and preventing photosynthesis, and it's unaesthetic. I'm also rocking the plant a little bit, which worries me because I don't want to dislodge the root system, so I think I'm going to stop that. But in the meantime, for all this nutrition regimen and whatnot, I'll just keep doing the same thing. I'll water every 2 days with what I have in the squirt bottle, which is distilled water with a little bit of Miracle Grow, just a fraction of a spoon, and part of a dissolved crushed multivitamin in there. It had a lot of insoluble components in it, so I poured out the supernatant after everything settled and washed out the bottle and poured the supernatant back in. And all of this is followed by a showering of distilled water. That's a little bit more heavy than what I used to do, but since the pot has dried out to a great extent over the last few weeks, I haven't been watering anywhere else in the pot. I figure the rest of the pot will act like a dry sponge and overwatering won't be a problem because the water will absorb outwards by the dry potting mix. So as you can see here, it's an exercise in futility to try to brush away all those potting mix particles. I think I'm ready to basically just pile on some potting mix to cover up those endosperm halves since they're no longer important. That's all stuff that should normally be underground anyway. So depending on what I want to do for aesthetics, I think that's a move I'll be making pretty soon. Thanks for watching. It's day 51. It's 4 days after I did a balcony-wide spraying of insecticide. I used Spectracide Triazicide, which contains a chemical analog of the naturally occurring chrysanthemum pyrethrins. So I suspected that maybe I had a ubiquitous infestation of some small microscopic parasites that were hindering the growth of all my plants. That's why I haven't had any updates in a while, or at least that's the main reason I suspect. Although I'm not sure if this lemon seedling needed help because it's been growing this entire time, just very slowly. I'm sure the rest of the pot has dried out by this point. I've been watering overhead with distilled water using my showering can every 2 or 3 days. And once in a while I'll use my squirt bottle and squirt some dissolved Miracle Grow on the base of this. So I think there's been a significant amount of progress. And as I'll show you later, it's coming along very nicely. And you can be the judge as to whether the Spectracide Triazicide had its effect. Chrysanthemum flowers have been known to have this insecticidal activity for supposedly thousands of years. And what pyrethrins do is they're a class of organic compounds that target the insect's nervous system. So when insects get sprayed by this compound or they come into contact with it, you know how they groom a lot, then they get poisoned and then they can't move after a few minutes. So this is day 61. You can see there's been significant growth after 10 days. So the regimen of fertilization and sparse watering just on this very spot and keeping the pot in this position where this is partially shaded has been fruitful thus far. I can't say the same would have happened if I were to have rotated this pot by 180 degrees and exposed this to harsher conditions in terms of receiving more sunlight and just baking in the hot afternoon, summer, early fall sun. So the leaves are significantly bigger. We have 4 nicely developed true leaves. The new ones are obviously smaller, but it's getting taller and it looks very healthy and robust. Again, I don't know if the insecticide played a role, but I didn't want to wait any longer and find out and take that risk that whatever was infesting my passion fruit vine would have destroyed everything else. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's day 69 of this Growing Lemon Trees from Seed series. It has 4 nice leaves that are greener, although they're not a verdant, complete green like the passion fruit vine leaves were in the middle and later on in the series. They're still pretty green. They sort of have a yellowish tint, just a little bit. I know some of that's due to the reflection from the color of the pot itself off the rim, and this seedling's close proximity to that, but I can still detect a little bit of yellow, which is fine. This plant has been healthy so far. It's been a bright spot. You can see all those fungus gnats burrowing in and out. Spraying pyrethrin analog pesticides hasn't really done much to get rid of that problem, although I haven't seen any gnats inside my apartment lately, so I think it's kept their numbers under control. So these pyrethrin based insecticides that I've been spraying twice a month, well, that's just for the last month, those decay very quickly. They have a half-life of 5 days, I think. So I'm looking through this and I'm shoring up the potting mix on the stem to cover up the green parts that are still exposed. That should have never been green in the first place, but due to exposure to sunlight, they and the positioning of the seed after it germinated, that stuff got exposed. I thought it would help with photosynthesis in the beginning, but now compared to the 4 true leaves, they're a very minor contributor, so why not just bury that stuff and be done with it, preserve moisture for the root system, and so forth. So I'm squirting on a light bit of dissolved fertilizer. I'm going to water sparingly like I have done every other day for this entire series, almost. So that's all you need to do, and if nothing's broken, I won't fix it. So it's day 81. A 5th leaf is on the way. Seems like they grow sort of like x-axis, y-axis. I don't know if it's going to rotate, but the 4th leaf is the biggest now. As with most seedlings, at some point the genetic programming determines that the leaves have to start getting big to match the adult-sized leaves. And this is from a backlit angle. I'm rotating this entire pot on a Lazy Susan. So you can see this micro blister appearance that I've been talking about since my navel orange seedling days. That didn't succeed, but this has, and you can see the edges look ruffled because of it, and it looks like there's all these little bubbles or blisters inside the leaves themselves. So if any of you know why that is, or if that's normal, abnormal, or due to some kind of citrus disease, please let me know in the comments. I haven't been able to explain that, and with a small sample size this year and last year of just 1, I can't really tell if that's something commonplace or just some kind of inherited citrus disease or whatnot, or is it actually supposed to be a phenotype of this plant. So I'm continuing my very light fertilization and watering regimen, and soon we should have a bigger 4th leaf and a 5th leaf, hopefully that's even bigger, and so on and so on. It seems like the leaves pop out in a cross pattern, although they don't develop symmetrically in pairs compared to most other plants. I expected it to be bigger after 81 days, but it's healthy, which is the main thing that counts. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to all my plant growing series on my YouTube channel. Thank you. Welcome back to my lemon growing series. It's day 85. The 5th leaf is coming along nicely. If you'll recall from the previous episode, there were 4 leaves, and the 4th one was by far the largest and most developed. So I'm adding some real Southern Californian soil to all my plants. Dug this up from the hills nearby. I hope it'll contain a lot of microbes that'll be beneficial. I'm sure it has seeds in it as well, as I've started to see small blades of grass and moss quickly develop in the dirt that I've watered. It contains small pebbles sometimes in the area where I dug, and some clumps of dirt that are just congealed, but if you pinch them, which I'm doing now, you break them easily. So hopefully this will provide a lot of microbes that will seed further into the potting mix, and by successive waterings, this dirt itself will get down to the root systems where I need it to be and congeal with the roots, and hopefully beneficial fungi and other microbes, bacteria, will form symbiotic relationships with the root systems of my plants. So I don't have enough dirt to give this entire pot a full seal. I've done it with my Joshua tree pot and my passion fruit pot. So that's pretty nice. For this one, I will need to go out eventually into the hills and dig up more dirt. I got a 5-pound bag last time. Well, it's the first time I've done this since 2014, where with my melon vine, I grew it indoors with lights, and the leaves grew to an enormous size, which is very atypical, I think. But ultimately, it didn't do that great without full sun. So I didn't really draw any firm conclusions back then, but I shied away from going out and digging up another 50-pound backpack's worth of potting mix. I'm not going to get that much more than the 5 pounds I currently have. I think another maybe 5 or 10 pounds would probably have me sealing off the top layer of all these pots, and I think that would help prevent fungus gnat activity, because the adult fungus gnats have to burrow in and out, and they can bypass all the burrowing very easily with potting mix. But with a fine dirt like this, it's the same action that sand would give, in that it's a lot more cumbersome for them to burrow through and dig in with their delicate wings. So it's day 96. I'm wondering if there's any growth acceleration due to adding this real dirt. I know it's only been 11 days since the first part of the video, but as you can see, this 5th leaf is now by far the longest. It's not as wide as the 4th leaf, but it's following this trend that I predicted, where each leaf will successively be much bigger than its predecessors, because at some point they have to get big and approach the size of mature lemon leaves. So I've seen all kinds of lemon seedling saplings growing in people's yards and whatnot, and I've seen really small ones that have bore fruit. So I'm not claiming that I'm anywhere near that stage, but it doesn't need to be a giant. And I know growth has been underwhelming in the first 96 days thus far, but I think things will pick up very soon. As you can see, under the changing light conditions, as I'm rotating everything on this Lazy Susan, there are some defects in the lowermost leaf. That leaf was somewhat obscured, shaded by a pineapple leaf adjacent to it that just got lower and lower. It was one of the original pineapple crown leaves. I cut that midway to give this plant a wide berth. So I don't think the defects are related, by the way. I think these blisters or slightly yellow spots were probably just due to maybe a viral disease that it inherited from its parent, malnutrition in the beginning due to the poor nature of potting mix for germination, early growth conditions. So the leaves are looking better and better, and I'm sure this plant will get taller and have a lot more high surface area functional leaves, and growth will accelerate. There's a 6th leaf on the way, and I'm sure that will be even bigger than anything we see here. So because I have 3 series, or well, 2 are still in the potential phase, although I know the pineapple is going to succeed. I have 3 things going on in this pot, and a little bit more beyond that actually. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but I have to water everything and have the soil layering and whatnot all go together pretty much. It's a great use of space to conserve space, because this seedling has grown so slow and it's growing off to one area, one side of the pot. So I could afford to have a lot more going on in this pot, and I think it'll be great for the channel, although It's kind of visual clutter. Alright, so that's basically it up until 96 days. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned. Hello and welcome back. It's day 85 of this Growing Lemon Trees from Seed series. This goes all the way to day 127. So on day 85, the fifth leaf is coming along nicely. The pot, as I mentioned before, is shared with a pineapple top and a cactus fruit. I'm trying to generate some new series to provide more content for my YouTube channel. And I'm sprinkling on a fine layer of California wild dirt. It pretty much looks all the same around here in the hills. It's got this reddish tint to it most of the time. So it's reddish brown. It's very fine, silty. If you disturb it, it gets over everything, and it has these little chunks that are congealed. They seem like pebbles at first touch, but they're not. If you give them a slight pinch, then they fall apart into powder. So that's the nature of this soil. It should be very rich and provide everything with microbes once I give it a few waterings with distilled water. I don't use fresh out of the tap water for the first waterings, at least, because I don't want the chlorine or chloramine inside to kill all the microbes. It could be beneficial. But then again, all these hill microbes in Southern California might not necessarily be the exact microbes that something like a lemon tree, which is non-native, would need. So we'll see what happens. I've got a pineapple top and a cactus fruit going in this pot. They're taking up lots of space as well, but this lemon seedling is growing very slowly, much slower than I expected, which explains why some of the lemon trees that I've seen in people's front yards are tiny in these neighborhoods. Maybe it's just not the right soil, maybe it just grows very slowly. In either case, I've used potting mix for most of this growing series, and now I'm trying my hand at adding some California wild dirt. So long to the sterilization. It was good when it lasted, but all of my plants have been off to a very slow start in 2017, and I think that might be a good reason why. So I should expect a lot more growth from this point out. Otherwise, that proves that theory false, and there must be some other reason why my plants aren't doing that well. I provided more than enough nitrogen from my fertilizer in the earlier months of the year, 2017. So what this silty soil is like is it's very hard to water through once it forms a congealed seal. Plates of it on the surface prevent water entry. So if you water, it takes a very long time for it to sift through, so you might be underwatering. So this is at day 96. I'm wondering if there's any growth acceleration due to adding this real soil. As you can see, after a few waterings, it's kind of hard to tell that it was there, especially on the perimeter, but there's definitely a different consistency to the surface, a different visual texture, so to speak. So this leaf is coming along nicely. It's a good looking plant. I just wish it were a lot bigger. I had to cut the second half, the tip of that adjoining pineapple leaf, because it was encroaching on one of the leaves here, or two. It was blocking the sunlight that it needs. This plant takes up very little space, and I didn't want it to be inhibited by a towering pineapple plant right next to it. So far, no symptoms of leaf miners or whatever these little blisters are caused by has reared its ugly head. However, one of the leaves at the bottom, the very first true leaf, seems like it's slightly worn out. I wouldn't go on a limb and say it's diseased, but it looks like it's on its way to being phased out, which is a little bit worrisome for a plant that's so small and takes so long to grow. So I'm not quite sure if those were avocado leaves. I think they're just true leaves. So these have these blistered appearance on the edges, and even the top leaf looks like it might have a little tiny bit of yellowing at the edges. So if you know what the deal is with this plant, as usual, people throw out all kinds of suggestions, and I'm always open to listening to advice, but there's a lot of conflicting advice as well at any given time. So I've tried a lot of different things with my plants in 2017, and the vitamins and fertilizer in crystalline form just weren't really doing it for this plant. So now I'm trying some wild dirt. I'm going to get more. I'm going to get 2 more Ziploc bags full of wild dirt, so that might be an additional 20 pounds, and then I'll have the top layer thoroughly covered and caked for all of my plants, and I hope that will be a great boon to the growth. But it's also getting colder. We're approaching late October, November, so pretty soon it's going to get cold again. The days are going to get shorter and shorter, and to be honest, this balcony only receives maybe 2 hours of direct afternoon angled sun at best. I really wish I had a open space so my plants could receive the normal over 12 hours of sunlight a day. 14, 16 would be great in the summer. So it's day 109. Let's see, the 5th leaf is the big one, pointing off to a 45 degree angle to the top. Looks a little lopsided and top heavy like this, but it's so small that that's not really a factor. There's a 6th leaf on the way, so everything looks relatively healthy. There's no marked deterioration anywhere. Maybe in that first true leaf, which, as I said earlier, is on its way to being phased out. But otherwise than that, I'm getting progress, and that's what counts. Other people have remarked before on my earlier episodes that their lemon tree seedlings are growing much faster. So either they had the perfect seasonality and soil and water conditions, or something else is going on here. I really expected a fruit tree to get off to a much faster start. At least the mango seedling, despite having that initial growth spurt and doing nothing for several months, it attained that size at least. Granted, the mango seed is much, much bigger than a lemon seed, so it has a much better running start hitting the ground. Otherwise than that, you can see all these little green specks in the background that aren't in focus. Those are little weeds that come from nature in the soil and the surrounding hills. So I have no idea what they are. I've also seen many blades of grass and little chunks of moss here and there. So I have no doubt that it's a more natural ecosystem, if you want to call it that, in these pots now. And these plants should benefit in theory, and everyone has a penchant for organic this and that anyway, so I think a lot more people will be pleased. So it's day 127. Got back from a long vacation, and I'm not too impressed by what I see. The first true leaf fell off as soon as I watered it. I was worried after being gone for 12 or 13 days that my plants would be very thirsty. But luckily it's been cold and not all that hot, and the layer of dirt on top, once it congeals and dries out, it pretty much holds the moisture of the potting mix underneath trapped in there. So there's that. And you can see there's a fair number of spots on some of these leaves. I don't know if that's a 3rd leaf. It's got some spots. Well, no, maybe those are leaves 2, 3, and 4 have some spots, so maybe it has some disease. Like I said, I always suspected that these blisters that were also present in the edges of my very tiny navel orange seedling of 2016, a discontinued series after episode 2. Maybe that's due to some inherited viral disease, some kind of citrus disease. So that's really the only explanation I have left in my bag of theories and explanations for the woeful underperformance of this lemon seedling. Granted, it's getting colder and that won't help, but citrus disease is as good of an explanation as any. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. I haven't fertilized chemically for quite a while for all my plants. I want to see if having this natural soil from the outside will provide as robust of a growth as what I was doing before. So that pretty much sums things up. If you see that giant crater, that well, it's not giant, it's a sinkhole in the pot where the cactus fruit was. That's where the fruit flesh rotted away. Hopefully I'll get some germination there and some prickly pear cacti at some point. So yeah, we'll let this thing run and see where it goes. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned to my YouTube channel. Alright, it's day 130. It's just 3 days after the previous episode in this series. And as you can see, there's already a big problem. So I was shocked as to how everything looked fine on day 127, and by day 130, this lemon seedling sort of has this unhealthy yellowish green look to it and has wilted over. So by the time you see something like that, you basically know in the bottom of your heart that it's over. When plants do that, there's really no rescuing. You can't blow dry the dirt or unscrew the situation. So this footage has been shown to you already in my Pineapple Crown pilot episode covering days 0 through 88. And I thought, since they share the same pot, maybe this global treatment with just some crushed up vitamins and fertilizer might help, because that's something I've been doing over the last 2 years, if you followed this channel, just to provide supplementation for things like calcium carbonate and trace metals, elements, and whatnot. It's not really actually for the vitamins. So I'm just scooping in some fertilizer, then I'll wash it all down, and hopefully that'll help. But I really knew that it wouldn't rescue the situation with that lemon seedling. So that's basically why this episode has, like in my other episodes, where I either cut things short, literally, or there's a failure and I just write finale in all caps just to let you know that that's the end, because I don't want people asking 2 or 3 years later, what happened to that plant. So day 85 of the lemon series, going back in time, is day 69 of the turmeric series. So this is a very long, drawn-out episode with a lot of failure footage. And I know that's not very exciting to show you what happened with some of these other series and what's going on my balcony. So in December 2017, I basically cleaned house. This is earlier. This is on October 25th. So I have a bag of wild dirt, and I'm showing you what happened to the turmeric series. I had a pilot episode, days 0 through 14, where I germinated everything in a Ziploc bag with hydrogen peroxide, a very mild solution to keep everything sterile. And I got green shoots, but I couldn't progress when I tried to transplant 3 of those. So I thought maybe the potting mix is too dry. These shoots come out of the base of these buds, much like ginger rhizomes in earlier years. So I figured it just needs to be kept moist around the base of that bud where a root can come out. And I did have roots here, but unfortunately I just couldn't go anywhere with this series. That happens a lot on this channel. Hope you can understand. Apologies for all of these failures, but that's realistically what happens with a lot of people. I think maybe that's part of the appeal of my channel, because all these other growing channels I see, they don't feature failure. They only feature success, and typically they have a house and a giant hoarder's garden just full of all these plants, and they only talk about the success and not really about the details, and they don't have this kind of video diary, so to speak, on the experience of the progressions you'll see when you try to grow these things, and none of the nitty-gritty really. It's just mostly talking head videos. So I don't really show my face or body during most of these videos. I think it's just better to let people have a close-up view in high resolution of what's actually going on, instead of just facing me and showing my head talking for like 15, 20, 30 minutes. So I decided to try to plow through with this, but unfortunately it didn't work out. I'll show you some other failures too, but Happy New Year, by the way. It's 2018. I filmed all of this in the waning months of fall and early winter in 2017. So basically there's been a lot of changes Throughout the years at YouTube, I would say the change is almost a constant, or maybe the only constant, in that every time they change the rules, a bunch of people get flustered and start complaining on the internet, and that's no exception in 2017. But there was a big upheaval about them using machine learning algorithm to determine what was suitable for advertisers, I think in August 2017. And basically, that affected a lot of channels. Entire genres went bust, and there was no real way to appeal these algorithms. They just don't have the manpower to manually screen anything. My channel may soon be big enough, have more than 10,000 subscribers, so that I may be able to appeal any wrongful decisions they make. But definitely that's a factor, the monetization of the ads. And my channel has actually done fairly well, complaining and all, despite all that, because I think I took a share of the pie from all those other channels that went bust, or at least all the content you see today is basically more advertiser friendly, and lots of people have went away from YouTube. So this is day 85 of the Lemon series. It's day 64 of another avocado germination attempt. One of the things that happened in 2017 was somebody convinced me to try to get the social media angle to work again. I don't think that really works, to be honest. The Facebook page doesn't have that many likes, but I know for years to come people will see those videos where it tells them to like my Facebook and Instagram and whatever. So this is an avocado where this is actually the second time where I dug it out. The seed was very beautiful and had this red wood-like sheen to it, on the seed coat at least in the beginning, but now it kind of looks gross. It just looks all blackened after being buried in the dirt for that long. So I broke off the root trying to excavate before, and then I planted it back, and as you can see it grew out of a fork there, and I broke a further down root tip again this time. So I was pretty upset at the whole process, but at the same time the top was exposed after all those weeks of watering, and I tried to get some wild dirt in there to seed in some microbes, form a better, more natural moisture seal, but ultimately none of this worked. The shoot just wouldn't come out. It was cracked at the top of the seed, but nothing came out. So yeah, this is just my generalized thoughts on 2018 going forward video, in addition to showing you a cleanup, a wrap-up of all these failed series at the end of 2017. So yeah, I've seen a fair bit of growth for my channel in 2017. I've managed to maintain interest going into the waning months of summer, fall, and towards the end of the year. Typically, plant growing channels suffer in those months and suffer very long malaise or decline. And I had that stretch in 2017 July where I released at first like videos every day, but I found that to be unsustainable, so I'm back to a more normal schedule. But I definitely look forward to getting more content out in 2018. It seems like people have a big interest in avocado germination. I have a compilation video of my avocado series, the first one, and it's done pretty well. That was a series in 2016. So as you can see, things failed in 2017 here. I tried to get this nice beautiful seed to germinate, but it wouldn't. I didn't do the conditions that I did in 2016. So that happens a lot. There are a lot of failures for my balcony, and a lot of unseen footage that gets cut out like this typically, until I decide to show it to you one day. So that's basically what's going on. It's not that I'm not doing anything. It's just that there's a lot of failure sometimes, and that can come in waves, and depending on the weather and what I'm doing, maybe I'm overwatering everything altogether. So the channel
actual prosperity in terms of all the content I can generate. It comes and goes in waves, and sometimes I see more success, and other times everything goes bust at once. So it's definitely not for lack of will to produce new videos. It's just sometimes everything goes bust and dies off, and then I have literally nothing to show you, or nothing that would interest people anyway. I'm sure tons of people are just bored looking at this failure footage already, and most people just like to see the beginning of a plant growing series, not the end. So this is day 151. Fast forwarding to the very end of December. This is December 30th, 2017. So as you can see, after another, 24 days, everything's gone. That one leaf fell off at the end of the last episode. That's actually green, which is surprising. I left that in there because I wanted to see if it could root and turn into a new plant. I know that's really wishful thinking, but for some reason that leaf can stay green, whereas everything that stayed attached to the stem is yellow. So I'm just going to pull that out. It seems like there's a bit of green down there, but I think we all know from experience that's not going to turn into anything, so it's just gone. So it's better to just move on. Seems like people like avocado growing. At Trader Joe's, for example, I saw cheap bags of avocados, smaller ones too, but the smaller seeds might be more manageable. But yeah, that would be a way to, say, get 6 seedlings germinating at once. I don't like this whole inadvertent one seedling per series phenomenon that I've got going on, because this trend is just something where failure is can't be tolerated. It's just there's no margin for error if you just have one thing going on. So there's no prickly pear cactus germination from the sinkhole left by the fruit. When I started that, it was quite warm. It was maybe late summer, and no, maybe it was fall. But after all that watering, the fruit rotted away and there's nothing left. So this is day 135 for the turmeric series. I couldn't get this thing to progress. Again, I'm sorry, that just happens a lot on my channel. I'm not an expert like many of you are. I receive really good advice from most of you, and you know, there's no way I can replicate necessarily what you've got going on, but I think people like watching my channel for what it is, just being honest with failure and showing in gory details like what happens at every step of the way. So these basically died at one point. There were a few heat waves in this very anomalous year in terms of weather in San Diego. This is San Marcos, actually, in California. In 2017, even in October, we had this heat wave where there were a few 100-degree days, and that's actually when these sprouts sort of went yellow and brown and all activity ceased. Likewise with my mango plant, the seedling, which is still alive and should be resuscitated for 2018 because it's got a new crop of leaves coming in. That basically saw many burned leaves after this brutal heat wave in October, which I'm sure nothing was really ready for in this plant community. And then there was a fairly hot stretch of 90-degree days in November, and this has been a very dry December, although that doesn't really matter because I'm doing all the watering. So I think a warm winter actually works to my advantage for this balcony growing. So this is day 130 for this second avocado germination attempt. It looked like that sprout was going to do something for a while, but it never did. And I don't really get why either. I don't think it was overwatering, I'm not sure. But for whatever the cause is, it's just over. It's easier to start off with many more seeds and perhaps try an indoor sterile environment growing a germination scenario on top of some warm electronic surfaces where I can monitor the temperature and whatnot and not have the temperature fluctuate like crazy. So I think in 2018 I'll try to get a series going for avocado again with many seeds. I'll have to wait for the weather to get a little bit warmer. It's currently January, so it's cold, the days are short, and as you can see, this passion fruit has shed leaves all over the place. I'm looking to trim that back too, because it's got a lot of unproductive growth that almost never sees any sun these days. So that pretty much concludes my thoughts going into 2018. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll have a lot more new content out pretty soon, since I have 2 new pots freed up. So thanks for watching. Have a happy new year, and please subscribe and keep coming back to my channel.